Well, how about that for a breakout performance? Up against one of the most in-form fighters in the game, Islam Makhachev well and truly sapped the chaos out of Charles Oliveira's performance to deliver a remarkably one-sided title-winning showcase, or at least it was quite one-sided compared to a lot of our expectations going in. Oliveira did do his best to utilize his full arsenal, especially on the mat, but Islam's control and fluidity from the top allowed him to be comfortable in situations that most of Charles's past opponents would see as dangerous. Coming into this bout, I was just about as torn as I could be over my prediction. It seemed like Makachev had the skill set to disrupt Oliveira's usual path to victory, but ultimately, I did believe that Oliveira's momentum would carry him through to another characteristically wild victory. After seeing Saturday night's fight, I do think that Islam would probably beat Charles 8, maybe 9 times out of 10. We weren't wrong to judge him based on his resume. His best win up until that point was likely either Dan Hooker or Thiago Moises, potentially even the young Arman Tsarukyan. But even those who saw this fight as a massive step up were aware that this newly crowned Dagestan champion ticked a lot of boxes. His team, of course, have been outstanding in recent years, and Makachev's slow rise has allowed him to mature into his skill set, facing strong but not always elite competition, a trajectory that gave him the necessary time to really round out his game. And in there with Charles, I think the thing that surprised me the most was Makachev's ability to have success on the feet. A lot of the success that guys like him and Khabib before him are going to have comes around as a direct result of their opponent's fear of the takedown or of the clinch. And that, of course, is a very valid means of augmenting the less heralded parts of your game. But I definitely was surprised at how Islam stood with Oliveira. Not only how willing he was to do so, but also the success that he was having. Especially as the fight wore on, it did seem as though Oliveira was a bit more tentative in his striking. He welcomed Makachev to the mat in the opening round, but there definitely was a shift or less in the way of outward enthusiasm from Dubronx after those opening 5 minutes. And Makachev perfectly used Oliveira's more reserved striking against him, taking advantage of the unusually long pauses in his offense to dictate the boxing exchanges. Before he eventually landed the punch that caused the knockdown while Charles was off balance, Islam was largely controlling the rhythm of the striking game, and if he wasn't coming out better in the moments that they collided, he was at the very least drawing even. And I do think that Charles was respecting his top game a hell of a lot more in that second round, in a way that really stifled his usual brand of chaos. I believe that a lot of Oliveira's game is built around controlled chaos, but even if he does get hit quite a lot, it doesn't deter him from continuing in the way that Makachev was able to deter him. Maybe he felt something on the mat in the opening round that he didn't like, but I was very impressed by Islam's ability to inflict his game onto his opponent. Charles was quite hesitant, and because of that, he was largely outstruck, outworked, and even dropped and finished by way of submission. That was just about as clean a win as anyone could be expected to have over a guy in Charles Oliveira who doesn't really allow for clean performances, especially these days. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all of our weekly uploads. Anyway, I know there have been a hell of a lot of narratives surrounding this fight. The coming of Khabib's protege, this bout being a modern day version of the Nurmagomedov-Ferguson fight we never got, the huge pressure that must have been weighing heavy on the untested Islam Makachev. But I came away from this fight with most of those narratives coming in as secondary to my real takeaway. This was a transformative performance for Islam Makachev, a great win against an undeniably great opponent, and a performance that I guess makes it easier for me to see him as his own presence atop the lightweight division. And what I mean by that is that it relegates the label of Khabib protege or the favorite student of the late Aldolmanop, and instead UFC 280 ended up with a clean and uncontroversial victory for the new champion of the single greatest division in the sport. Makachev will take his well-deserved spot among the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, and I just think that it's a hell of a jump for a fighter to make, and the fact that it feels right or feels correct is actually quite exciting, because let's be real, we had every right to question his resume, even with the circumstances being what they were. At the time, we could only speculate as to how the skills we had seen would translate to the upper tier of the 155-pound division. In Charles Oliveira, we had a champion who was ripping up the script on his own career, beating and finishing the best of the best with a level of flair that was just so magnetic. And I think over the years, it has been hard to say anything with too much certainty when it comes to Islam Makachev. Indeed, we hear things and we suspect things, but like Sean O'Malley and his own emergence as a top 5 bantamweight, before this fight you could only really say so much about Islam before you started veering off into speculation. And for me, I guess I'm just happy to see such a bright and promising talent make good on his clear potential. The questions we have are no longer as plentiful as they were just a few days ago, and the champion of the division is quite clearly Islam Makhachev. Moving forward, I'm excited to see if the UFC actually go ahead with the Volkanovski matchup. When you're the pound for pound number one and you've just gone 3-0 over someone like Max Holloway, you can certainly call your shots. And though I actually would prefer to see Makachev defend his title before a super fight, I also believe that the timing is pretty ideal for Volkanovski, so if they do go down this route, I certainly won't complain. I do think that the technical mastery of the featherweight champion will offer up a different set of challenges than Islam could have expected from Oliveira, but Makachev really does seem to have the potential to rule this division, and while you won't find a bigger fan of Alexander Volkanovski than myself, a lot of the mystery that surrounded Islam Makachev has now disintegrated. And yeah, I guess I'm just happy to report that he is just as good as his reputation and billing would suggest. And that'll just about do it for this video. But what did you make of this title-winning performance from Islam Makachev as he managed to pretty handily defeat Charles Oliveira to take home the belt? And who are you backing in the possible super fight between the newly crowned lightweight champion and the featherweight king Alexander Volkanovski? If you do want to help in supporting the channel, liking the video and subscribing would do wonders. And as always, thank you for watching.